So I'm just going to briefly explain how this is going to work and then shut up so you can hear from our excellent speakers. So you have here appearing in the screens, me, Ben. We've also got Libby from Data Orchard, who is making sure everything works, though she, on a previous incident, did have to step in and chair it briefly. So you might hear from her. And then we have Rob, Gethen Smith and Sian Basker, who are going to give our talks today, how it's going to work. Sian will give a presentation, Rob will give us a presentation, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. We will definitely not overrun, so you can relax and be comfortable that you will be able to get back to work at your planned time. As people are talking, if you have questions, please just drop them into the Q&A just drop them into the chat. Someone's using the Q&A as well, so use that. We'll be able to keep a handle on any of it. So I'll just finish off, but I'm going to introduce both of our speakers straight away and then hand over to them. So first of all, Rob Gethen Smith. So Rob has over 20 years experience leading digital transformation for leading charities such as Macmillan, Anthony Nolan, and also as a CIO and as a consultant. He's worked for leading cloud CRM and ERP software companies. I'm not sure I remember what ERP stands for, but he can tell us that, where he developed deep understanding of these technologies. He's passionate about enabling organizations to increase their impact through strategic and digital transformation with a focus on customer experience, data, growth, and innovation. And that sounds very busy, but he's also a trustee for the international welfare charity SPANA, and he chairs the Chartered Institute of Fundraising Digital Technology Committee, which is quite a lot of stuff. Sian is co-chief executive of Data Orchard CIC. She became a data champion following over 25 years exploring new frontiers in digital technology and bringing the benefits to the non-profit sector. I feel like both of these things, I'm explaining how old our speakers are, but that may be just because I turned 51 on the weekend. She helped to create the UK's first public internet access programs in the early 1990s, co-founded the first women's online resource centre, and since then she's helped numerous marginalised, disadvantaged communities have a voice and get online. She's held senior roles in digital strategy and management with local, national and international charities. She's worked in impact measurement, business development and trustee roles. And at Data Orchard, she leads our pioneering research on data maturity in the non-profit sector and the development of our tools and services around data maturity. She's also my boss, so I really hope that you give me some really tricky questions for her. Okay, that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over first to Sian, then you'll hear from Rob, and then we'll come back for some Q&A.
Thank you, thank you. Welcome everybody. I'm just going to share my screen also, so bear with me for one moment. There we are. Can you all see my screen? Yeah, jolly good. So yes, thank you for joining us today. For those of you who don't know us, Data Orchard is a social enterprise that specialises in helping other organisations to get better with data. And I'm hoping you're here because you also have a role in helping organisations get better with data. And I was delighted to see from the bookings that many of you are also consultants and businesses or freelancers. I think even some volunteers from pro bono schemes that work to build the data capabilities of charities. I will state up front that we're primarily interested in the non-commercial space for which our data maturity assessment tool was developed, and that's where we as a social enterprise seek to have impact. However, we've also seen interest from those working in the commercial sector too, and parts of today's session will be relevant to all sectors. So today I'm going to talk about three things. I'm going to describe the data maturity tool and the different versions available. I'm going to talk about how your organisation, the organisation version, can be customised to support you with your work with clients. And then I'm going to round off with some benefits and rewards of using the tool with your clients, and both for yourselves, your clients, and the wider sector. As Ben mentioned, we have been researching data maturity since 2015, so it's been quite a long time. In short, the data maturity assessment was created to enable organisations to self-assess how they're doing with data, see how they compare with others, and identify where they should focus to improve. We launched a free version about over 2.5 years ago. And we followed that with a more sophisticated version in 2020. And we're delighted it's been used by thousands of people now from hundreds of different organisations, and we're really seeing the evidence of its success as a tool for learning and a catalyst for action. Now, our analysis of users and feedback suggests that around 10% of our users come from agencies and consultancies and support providers like yourselves. So we've decided to put this event on today for several reasons, partly because we believe that we share the same problem space. Secondly, because we're part of a quite small niche service sector with an enormous and urgent task to address the problems. And thirdly, because we see there are mutual benefits to making our assessment tool available to partners and agencies. Before I start, I think it would be helpful to set out some definitions. If you've heard these before, apologies, but if you haven't heard them, they're really important. So first of all, in terms of our definition of data maturity, we define this as an organisation's journey towards improvement and increased capability in using data. And when we talk about data, we have a really broad and holistic view of that. So all of it, not just in one department or team or project. It's not just structured data or even just digital data. It's not just numeric data, it's all the text, images, videos, maps, all of it, which means it's absolutely everywhere in all of its messy complexity all over our clients' organizations. And which is why it's really helpful to have a simple framework to help give structure to how people think about it. And so this is our data maturity framework. It's sometimes called a maturity model. Essentially, it's a structured description of the characteristics and stages of improvement. And it's really aimed at describing what poor, good, and great look like. And these kinds of maturity frameworks have evolved primarily from the quality management field, and their aim is to simplify all that complexity and enable organizations to be measured and compared. And like ours, most are used for promoting best practice and with the ultimate purpose of leading to learning and improvement. So our data maturity framework describes 5 stages of development, from unaware through to emerging, learning, developing, and mastering. And there are 7 key themes that we have identified as the critical success factors in driving an organization along that journey. A couple of those quite obvious, like data and the tools that you need to collect and store and analyze. A couple of them very much about purpose, so the ways in which you use data and the ways in which you analyze it. And ever such a lot of it is about people. So the leadership and the culture and the skills are absolutely essential in driving data maturity. Now, I mentioned that I felt we shared some similar problems in our problem space. I would say at a very high level in the sector, we have a problem with overall data maturity. When we assess and analyze all of the users of our tool, it suggests that most are at fairly early stages of data maturity, in the kind of emerging and learning stages. And they're facing lots and lots of challenges. There's a whole report called the State of the Sector report, of which our second version will be coming out shortly. And I think the other thing to say about the sector is there are lots and lots of organisations that need help, hundreds of thousands of them. So certainly we have work to do. The second problem is that data's not all that popular. It's a bit Marmite, really. Obviously, we love it, and I'm guessing many of you are here today because you absolutely love it. But it can be really hard to engage people, especially leaders and busy people who are not that interested in the subject. When we did our State of the Sector research, we found that 63% of organisations say their leaders are not convinced about the value of data. So it's a real challenge for us. Again, just coming back to that complexity, because data is everywhere in an organisation, a real challenge can be just even knowing where to start, both for the organisation themselves, sometimes for us as consultants as well. So it's a useful framing of the client situation. Support can be hard to sell. I think this aligns with the issue about the lack of popularity, that there is this gulf between perhaps the need and the demand. We're quite a small organisation at Data Orchard. We've got 15 staff and associates. We're quite customer intimate. We tend to work with a small number of organisations in quite an intensive way, maybe 25, 30 projects a year. It is growing and changing, and we've certainly seen since the pandemic a real growth in interest in digital and in data. And we're also really delighted to see there's a growing number of data strategists or in-house people in the sector whose job it is to now take responsibility for data. And many of those people also need support. Interestingly, in our State of the Sector report, only 31% of the non-profit organisations said that they had access to external data and analytics support and advice from experts that they trust. So it's really important for us to show our worth and our value to our clients. And the final point around our shared problem space is about evidencing our impact. So it's sometimes difficult to evidence the impact that we've had as support providers on our clients, especially in the longer term. So this was a key motivator for us in doing this research in understanding data maturity, to know really whether we were making a difference to those that we're working with. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So this is an example from our data maturity framework. This, please don't try and read it. I'm not expecting you to read it, but this page focuses on the leadership theme, and it's taken from a document that is the model that sits behind our data maturity tool. We just released a new version of this in January, and you can, it's free to download under Creative Commons license for non-commercial use. What we found is this as a theoretical model was all very well as a conceptual approach, but it was not very digestible or accessible, especially for busy leaders who were already not that interested in data. And we as researchers were interested in understanding what questions an organisation needs to ask and how can you measure data maturity. So we've worked with hundreds of organisations over the last 5 years to develop the tool with a focus on really trying to aim it at non-technical people and in an accessible language. So this next slide just gives a hint at what the data maturity assessment tool is about. It's essentially an online questionnaire designed around these 7 themes and the sub-themes therein. So for example, in the theme on data, there are questions about how data is collected, there are questions about quality, about the sources of data, and about assets and how those assets are managed and viewed. So that's a quick sort of snapshot of the data maturity assessment principle. In terms of our products available, we have 3 products available. The first one is the free tool, and that's even got a short 5-minute taster version. Many organisations have tried this out or used this as a starter with their clients. If you're working with really tiny organisations, that can work really well. For the paid version, the premium version, is a little bit more sophisticated in that it is really aimed at multiple people in the organisation, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And those are priced between about £500 and £5,000, depending on the size of the organisation. And we offer discounts, reseller discounts to partners. And then the third product that we have is a special cohort version. So we've been looking at how we can conduct data maturity at scale at a sort of more strategic and collective level. And we've got a whole other event running on this on 22nd of June, in which the Scottish Government, who have taken 7 organisations through the process together, will be speaking. So just to talk about each of those in a little bit more detail. The individual version, the principles are: a person completes an assessment, it takes about 20 minutes, and as part of that they benefit from learning. One of our primary impacts is on learning, and as people are answering their questions, they're understanding more about what's possible, and there are definitions and hover-overs in the assessment itself that can help people to understand a bit more. They get a measure of where they assess the organisation to be, and they get inspired, and it generates ideas and motivation to improve. As I say, the individual version, free version, is aimed for individual users or for very tiny groups of people to take together. But because data is a team sport, and an individual can never really give a true picture of what's going on in the organisation, the organisation version is better, especially for those who are really serious about data strategy. So one of the wonders of our data maturity tool is it's really exciting when you start to do this at scale. As I said earlier, when I was talking about the 7 themes, without leadership and culture and skills, an organisation is not going to get better. And so the people are really fundamental to it. And our tool is really designed for engaging lots of people, sometimes everybody, in fact. And the more people you gather, the more perspectives you gather, the more accurate and representative the results will be. And there is a whole process that wraps around the data maturity assessment of engagement before and during and after the assessment. And indeed, earlier this year, we launched a whole resource pack that we can provide with press releases and newsletters and introductory presentations and all sorts of useful tools and resources for that engagement process. I mentioned earlier about learning. So again, by engaging lots of people at the same time, they're also all learning together and all benefiting from that sort of increase in their knowledge and awareness. And also, it helps to shape that framing and thinking about data in the organisation. The other second key impact that we're most excited about is that it's been shown to be a catalyst for action. So when you engage lots of people in this process, you've got a collective increase in inspiration, motivation. People start talking about data. That's an absolute, everybody feeds back that, that by taking the data maturity assessment, it stimulates dialogue and conversation. In fact, Jenny Andrew from the Chartered Society for Physiotherapists and is head of data there said, oh, it's like fairy dust. People are coming up to me and talking to me about data. And so that really made my heart sing. And of course, the other thing about that catalyst for action is that it leads on to plans and investment of resources to improve. So I just wanted to mention a few features about the customization. So firstly, it can be branded either to you as a consultant or to your client. Usually we do it to the client's branding, but sometimes we can co-brand. You can add custom questions to the assessment. You can, and then you'll get some unique links. So each organisation will have their own customized sign-up page with their branding and questions on. Each person who takes the assessment gets their own individual report on how they personally assess the organisation. Then you get the whole organisation report that combines all of those individual responses, and it has some more sophistication in the algorithm around how it handles don't knows and missed questions. You get the resource pack that I mentioned earlier, and you also get a copy of the data to download at the end. So there's in terms of the practicalities that go with that, we would need to ensure that there are data sharing agreements in place between ourselves and yourselves and your clients as well. But that's all fairly straightforward, so, and quite well established now. This is an example of a report. So as I said earlier, your logo goes here at the top, or your client's logo can go there. It gives the organization an overview of what stage you're at. So this organization is actually doing quite well. They're in the developing stage. They've had responses from 133 people, and overall they've scored 3.2 out of 5. It will tell you how you scored along these 7 themes. It will highlight where you've scored strongest. So in this example, this organization scored highest in uses, data and culture. And it will indicate the areas to focus on. So in this case, analysis tools and skills. And then you can drill into the report. Like for example here, drill into analysis, and it will give you an overview of how you're doing compared to the benchmark group. In this case, they're spot on, 2.9 compared to 2.9. And it will describe the current stage that the organization is at, and then what the next stage looks like. So that's an example of the report. I did mention, of course, that really it's about the start of a journey. So this is, in a way, the most exciting bit really happens after the assessment, when an organization starts to talk about and plan about what they're going to improve. Most organizations take some time to resource and implement their plans. And I think our, and the rewards again take longer after that. So this can always be a frustration as a consultant, is that you may make your recommendations and provide the advice, but your client will take some time to implement those. And this is a description of our theory of change, which we haven't in fact tested and tweaked since testing as well. So as I mentioned, I'm sure you're all very familiar with the kinds of problems that your clients have. The organisation takes an assessment, they get that report on where they're at and their comparisons through benchmarks to the sector. There are options for more advanced analysis, and we can offer treasure troves of charts and facilitated workshops, but not all organisations want that level of detail. The immediate benefits, as I said, on completing the assessment are this shared understanding, the objective view of where the organisation is now, and those raised aspirations. And then these bits in orange are really where probably you come in and we come in. Sometimes our clients do it themselves. But this is really around the discussion around where the change and improvement is needed with colleagues, and the development of those plans, and getting the leadership support and the resources to implement those before that implementation process happens, and those wonderful rewards of data maturity come from. And the key benefits we've seen for clients include increased knowledge and experience, better planning and decision making, better services and products, greater impact, increased efficiency, income, increased credibility and influence, and more collaboration and data sharing. So there are great wonders to be seen, and we're delighted to see more case studies and examples coming through of those kinds of rewards. And as you probably know, data strategies will be different for every organisation. Some of the ways in which the data maturity assessment can be used, particularly in larger organisations, it's really helpful to explore that internal landscape. And sometimes we do internal benchmarking. That's a very popular thing with larger organisations. Sometimes there's geographical or departmental analysis. And sometimes it's more qualitative around, you know, the feel and attitudes in an organisation. Then there's the comparison with peer organisations. So we can do this as standard. It compares with all of the other organisations that have taken the data maturity assessment tool. But also we can do bespoke ones. So you know, organisations like yours, so looking in housing or education or social care, local government, those kinds of customisations can be tailored. And also evidencing the progress made. So you can see this as an opportunity to benchmark, as a sort of set a baseline for measuring progress in the future. And I'll give a demonstration of a repeat data maturity assessment shortly. This is just an example of internal benchmarking. So this is an organisation that decided to compare how their staff in different services and teams scored the organisation. So you can see some scored quite highly in this service area one. There was a lot of consensus of opinion and they thought they were doing pretty well. Whereas the executive leadership also had a lot of consensus of opinion, but they didn't think the organisation was doing it all well. So these kinds of analyses are quite interesting for stimulating discussion about where there's consensus and disparity of opinion as well, and finding pockets of good practice in organisations. I talked a bit about repeat assessments over time. So this is taken from a cancer support charity we work with between 2018 and 19. They've been conducting assessments actually for several years now, but what we wanted to do was baseline where they were at before we started working with them, and then measure them again a year later to see how that organisation were doing. And it's presented some quite interesting results. Obviously, they previously thought they were doing fantastically with users, and then that actually dropped in the second assessment, which may match with the increases around their skills and tools. And over time, what we were also interested in was whether the momentum continued. So after we'd stopped working with them, was that change and growth sustained? And a year later, after we'd stopped working with them, you could see that they had increased in many areas. And as I mentioned, it's this issue about the time that it takes for clients to implement change. And again, we measured them last year in June 2021. I'm just going to summarize the beginning and end. So that's over a 3-year period of change for just one organization. And we've got a number of organizations we're doing analyses with on these longer term bases. So just to wrap up, really, some benefits to you. As I said, it's an independent tool to help you diagnose your clients' needs. It can help you to enable you to compare your clients to others. Can help you to work out where to start, helps with securing leadership support. So some of our approaches give the option of actually running workshops with just live workshops and getting leaders to take the assessment. And it also helps you to measure your impact. For your clients, it's a really accessible way of engaging lots of staff. You get the benefit of the learning and increase in knowledge about data within the organisation. Get more of a collective inspiration and motivation to help improve. And assuming that you have been successful in affecting your organisation's data maturity, then you also get the wonder of showing that your support interventions have been effective. So my final slide is really about how we can benefit each other. I would say that for Data Orchard, collaboration is one of our 5 core values, and we see yourselves as being part of a specialist data practitioner community, and we have been delighted that we've never worked alone. We've conducted our research and created the tools with hundreds of specialists and non-profits. And what we understand as data maturity now is going to change. And so it is a diverse field. It's a very dynamic and exciting field. And we really hope that as practitioners that we can share our knowledge and build that pool of good practice as well. So lots of talking and sharing around data maturity. Also contributing to best practice. So again, by you using the tool, it helps to raise awareness and education about the value of data, and helps to contribute to understanding the benefits of data maturity. And finally, I suppose by doing this at scale, by promoting even the free data maturity tool, or any version of the data maturity tool, contributes to that knowledge about data maturity in the sector. And I think there's some really great opportunities to build that as a resource for us all to help understand the context in which we're working. So I'm going to stop talking now about the tool and the wonders of the tool, and I'm going to hand over to Rob. So Rob Gethen works for a consultancy called Equantiis, and I'm going to leave him to talk about his experience of using Data Orchard's Data Maturity Assessment tool.
Thank you, Sian. Hello, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully I'm going to share the right one. I think I've shared the right one. Yeah, hi everyone. So I guess the first thing to say is for many years now, a great passion of mine has been helping organizations develop their strategic data capability. And that's going back in my role as a chief information officer, working for several organizations, and now more recently as a consultant. So I just really want to share sort of my latest thinking on how to go about doing it, actually, and in particular, how I have sort of approached working with Data Orchard and building in their data maturity framework into my approach. And I'd be really, I know I'm is it preaching to the choir or the converted or whatever? I know lots of you on this webinar get it completely, and I'd be really keen to get your feedback. And as Sian says, look, this is about developing all of our capacity and capabilities. So I'm really happy, to share and embark in a sort of mutually beneficial conversation about all of this. I'm going to quickly say a word about Equantiis in terms of who we are, just to set the scene. We're a team of independent consultants. We specialize in what I'd describe as data, digital technology consulting to a range of organizations, really helping them to improve what they do and how they go about doing it. And we work with higher education, membership and charity organizations in particular. One of the things that, so this is one of my favorite quotes, probably of all time. If we have data, let's look at data. If all we have are opinions, let's go with mine. And I often show this, put this in front of the organizations I work with, and I never fail to get a wry smile, because it pretty much describes where most organizations are that I engage with and talk to. And sort of second to that, and this really amplifies what Sian was saying, the conversation about data is really coming of age. I don't think it's come of age yet. We're still getting there, but it really is coming of age. I don't know, my own narrative around this is that GDPR gave us, did us a great service in May 2018, and it rose, it made everyone at the senior table realize how badly we've been looking after our data, let alone how well we've been optimizing it or leveraging its value. And but what I am absolutely seeing, and again, I'd be keen to hear from everyone, if they see the same thing, but this now is here to stay. People want to talk about it, but quite often what they lack and where they need external help is pretty much just having the language, the right to be able to have a conversation about data. You have to develop a capability for having a conversation about data at the right level. And that's what I often see as a starting point, is one of the biggest hurdles to get over. On this slide, this pretty much is the approach I developed over the number of years, like I described, to helping organizations develop a data strategy. Going through 3 phases, from discover through to define through to how do we deliver this. And in phase 1, it's very much about answering the question why. Where are we trying to get to and why in the vision setting bit, and where are we now in the data maturity assessment. And it really sets the scene properly for the rest of the project that we do with organizations. Vision setting is about having some key stakeholder interviews internally, but more importantly, having a vision setting workshop with key staff and stakeholders in an organization, bringing the right people together to actually answer the question, where are we trying to get to in the context of how we want to strategically and operationally use data, where are we trying to get to? We use a technique called postcard from the future, and we use that as a way to help people articulate that future destination after we've delivered a data strategy, what that strategic data capability looks like from the perspective of service users, beneficiaries, stakeholders, staff, supporters, whoever you like. And we help organizations articulate, and then we produce a one-page summary in terms of vision and outcomes for the data strategy project. And then that leads us into the data maturity assessment, because it's all well and good saying where do you want to get to, but where are you right now today? And this is where, you know, the relationship with Data Orchard and Equantiis picked up about a year ago. I was looking for an independent data maturity framework and tool that we could use. And we did have one, by the way. You know, we've actually previously developed our own survey tools, but I just wasn't happy with it. And equally, it didn't offer the benchmarking database. It didn't have, you know, the specialist insight that Data Orchard bring to the table here. And also, it kind of tied our customers into using us if they want to repeat this data maturity assessment in the future. And I don't want that. You know, our job is to really get them on the right path, and then for them to be able to run the assessments, knowing that that assessment tool is being looked after as well on an ongoing basis. And exactly as Sian was describing just now, the benefits of doing that for that cancer charity, I mean, that just looked fantastic, the spider graphs. And I've, you know, we've run this assessment with a few organizations, and their intention is to run it again in a year's time so that they can assess their progress. We also actually, before we do the maturity survey, we do a qualitative data maturity workshop. I'll show you an example in a second. And the reason we do that is exactly what we were talking about just now. Quite often, in particular, the senior team of the organizations we work with can't even have a conversation about data. They do not know where to start. So we actually run a qualitative exercise with them to look at data maturity, but in a more like a focus group before you go out and do the survey. And also it sets the scene really well for running the survey, because the senior team get it. They absolutely understand where they think they are against the different dimensions within the framework. And I'll show you an example in a second. That's the discovery phase. And then we take that into the next stage, which is the analysis. And here, coming out of discovery, what we identify are a series of data use cases. And we put those through a process called data capability gap analysis, and then data capability design. And essentially what we're doing with each data use case is looking at really just answering the simple question: what is stopping you from delivering this use case today? What are the barriers? We look at the range of dimensions across leadership and governance, culture and change, tools and technology, and also, you know, people capacity and skills. Really trying to understand what are the barriers, and therefore flipping that round 180 is what are the enablers, because then that, once we collect, if you look at those priority use cases, you collect all of the enablers, you can begin to have that strategic conversation with the organizations around prioritization. You can't change overnight, but where do we want to focus first? And that really leads into the sort of planning and delivering phase, which is about coming up with a strategic approach for the organization. As Sian said, again, you know, for every organization it's different. And what we really try to make sure is we get under the skin of understanding what's important to them, where do they need to develop their capabilities fastest, where do they need to be mastering versus where do they just need to be emerging, for instance. And that's the kind of conversation we have with organizations to make sure then the data strategy is unique to them and there's a roadmap for change alongside that. So what we're doing all the way through this process is really helping that conversation develop about data and data capabilities and maturity, so that we end up with a roadmap that makes sense. And we do take that a stage further, because what's really keen and important is that during these projects that we run, we do generate a lot of excitement. Actually, I just had a chief exec tell me this morning that the data maturity workshop we ran right last week for them was really exciting. And no, he said surprising, he almost apologized. He said, do you know what, it's surprisingly, you know, exciting and good fun doing it. You know, who knew having a conversation about data could actually be exciting and good fun? So wow, I mean, you know, that's an amazing feedback, and that we find that really grows and develops. So what we make sure when we get to the end of the project is that the organization knows we've built up that momentum. They know exactly what they need to do as a next step. So we do the program planning with them, we agree what the projects are, and they know exactly what to do next. So there isn't this sort of the consultants walk out the door and then there's this lull of activity and everyone thinks, phew, we can go back to our day job. But actually, they know what to do. So just a couple more slides. One was, in terms of how we use the maturity assessments, like I say, we do a qualitative exercise as well as the Data Orchard maturity survey. So on the left is an example of there's the sort of workshop style approach that we do. And we pose two questions, actually. Where are you now, which is kind of represented by the arrows, and where do you want to be? And what it really draws out is this strategic thinking from the senior team of, where do we, where do we think we are now? And let's talk about that. And but also, where do we need to be? Where do we need to master this versus, let's say, is it okay to, arrive at the learning stage? We always agree a time frame, by the way. And again, this organization I've just been working with, when we ran this last week, we agreed an 18-month time frame. So when they're thinking, where do you want to be? It's a very realistic conversation. Where do we realistically think we can be in 18 months? And we did agree in that workshop they would also have a stretch target of 3 years as well. So they could say, yeah, but in 3 years, we want to get even further. And then on the right is an example of a project I ran last year, of an output from the survey, where you could clearly see this was just at the organization level, the benchmarking sort of scores. And of course, what you do have the opportunity in using the survey, there's 3 bespoke questions as well. And again, I've just been literally this morning talking to the steering group within this charity. What do you want those 3 bespoke questions to be? And we agreed that it would be, what's your department? What's your seniority in terms of leadership, management, or operational? Just those 3 levels. We didn't want to be any more specific. And then the third question, which we thought would be really interesting, was what is your degree of confidence when it comes to using digital tools and digital technology? We're kind of asking the question, the degree to which you consider yourself to be a digital native versus someone who has, been sort of embracing these tools later on. So we'll see how that sort of pans out in the next. We're launching that survey tomorrow, going out to 150 staff. So, and then this is right at the heart of our framework, is this capability framework, which very similar, I guess, to the Data Orchard maturity framework. But there's definitely alignment. But this is when we get into looking at the use cases, we're looking for those, like I said, barriers and enablers across a range of dimensions for each use case. What we often come up with is a long list of around about a dozen use cases for each coming out of the discovery phase. And we ask organizations to prioritize, and we end up doing about 5 use case workshops using this model to help identify what the enablers are. In the projects we run, we roughly look at an 8-week from beginning to end. This is how we try to run it. Sometimes it takes a bit longer. It really does depend on the organizations that we work with and their availability, but we can absolutely do it in this sort of 8 weeks. I think that's all I was going to say. I mean, it's early days still, us working with Data Orchard, but what I would say, it's been really straightforward. The tool itself is got, not just the tool itself, that's really self-explanatory and easy to use. We get, perfect, absolutely all the support we need from the Data Orchard team. There's flexibility for organizations to contract in the use of that through us or directly through Data Orchard as well. So there's a lot of flexibility there. But ultimately the way we approach this is, this tool is best of breed. It's sector specific. It absolutely enhances our ability to deliver these projects, and also sell these projects. It really helps us position what we're doing in an even stronger and more fundamental way, and just be able to add more value to the organizations we work with. So I think that's all I was going to say, Ben. So I'll hand back to you at this stage. Yeah,
okay, that's great. Thank you very much. This is where, if we were actually in the room, there would be rapturous applause at this point. I found that very interesting. We have a couple of minutes just left for questions, and there are a couple of questions in the Q&A. If you're quick, you might be able to get a question added in time. I will start with the first one. So the question is, how long does the assessment tool take? I wonder about burden on staff. And I just maybe we'll start with Rob and just talk about, because it feels like it is quite onerous. So
taking the survey is 20 minutes, right? I mean, and then it's all the way you position it, and you know, people are going to prioritize these things if they're bought into the overall process and project that you're running. It's as simple as that. But 20 to 30 minutes to actually take the survey tool, and obviously the value add is the, you know, what comes next.
Anything to add to that, Sian?
Yeah, just add that you can do it in different ways, or you can have hybrid approaches. So sometimes we've used it in workshops. So we've launched the tool with a group of senior leaders, and they introduce data maturity. They go and take the assessment on during the workshop, and then come back and talk about it. And the wonder of that is that you get them fresh and live and taking it at the same time. And then often, if those people are the senior leaders or team leaders, then they can cascade it like a sort of normal staff survey via email, and organizations will keep it open for 2-3 weeks. Sometimes it depends how hard they have to rally and how much they need to nudge and chivvy staff to complete it. But usually, as I said, it's the combination of the engagement process and getting the comms team and getting that sense of excitement and having champions to encourage people to take the assessment is good. But yeah, it only takes typically about 20 minutes.
Excellent. I'm going to just use Chair's prerogative and ask a question that occurred to me that nobody else has asked, which was, so I think, Rob, you gave like a really clear framework for how you engage with organizations, but I wonder more generally for the people watching, where do you think is the right time to reach for something like a data maturity assessment, and when's the time you definitely shouldn't do that? So let's start with Rob. I'm sure Sian will have opinions too.
Well, for me, it's fundamental. I mean, if we have data, let's talk about data. You know, it's to make the whole, you know, the organizations who want to develop their strategic data capability, let's make it evidence-based. You know, if we base it on opinions of some senior people in the organization, we'll probably get it slightly wrong, if not completely wrong. So what it does is give us that, you know, we start with what do we think we need to do, and then let's ask the organization if we've got that right. So it's right up front, and that discovery part, as I've positioned it, is just fundamental.
Sian?
I think it depends on who the champion and lead is in the organization and what their priority is. So sometimes, you know, if it's just a specific department that wants to deal with one specific data set, or they have a particular, you know, research or analytical problem around one particular aspect of the service, then it may not be that the whole organization is going to get engaged. And equally, we've done work with organizations who want to measure their impact, and we've sometimes thrown in the data maturity assessment as part of that, and it's been too much for some organizations, particularly if they're at a very low stage of data maturity and perhaps haven't got that even the leadership buy-in to even start thinking about it, I think. And I suppose that's where the taster stuff might come in, is just gently nudging people and organizations to start some initial conversations.
Okay, great. I think this will probably have to be the final question. So we'll start with Sian, but Rob might have a perspective on it as well. What kind of relationship do you like to have with consultants? Do you prefer us to use the product and run with it ourselves? Do you prefer to tell us all about the project, who our clients are, what their results are, and almost deliver the project in partnership?
We are open to either and both of those approaches. Generally, we see ourselves sitting in the background, and it's the consultant's role to front the project and front with the client. So we don't generally find out a lot more around what else the client is doing. We're just sort of I suppose, often in those very early discovery stages. So typically, you know, we agree right up front about data sharing and how much involvement you as the consultant want us to have. I mean, we can and have done workshops to introduce the tool ourselves, but also the wonder of our resource pack is that we give you the tools. You know, there are whole PowerPoint presentations and videos in there that you can use yourselves as tools with your clients. So we're happy either way, really.
We're happy, you know, it's the resource I didn't mention, but I think maybe it was mentioned earlier, you know, the resources that come with the actual survey tool are just fantastic. You know, as far as I'm concerned, we've got, you know, we're self-sufficient as consultants. We've got everything we need. Now and again, we'll come back and have a conversation with Sian and Libby just to, you know, give some feedback like we did the other day, Sian. But, you know, it's we can run with it, and that's perfect for our use. And like I say, if the organizations then want to pick up the relationship with directly with Data Orchard, then that's fine too from our perspective. So there's a lot of flexibility there.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's all we have time for. So I want to say a big round of applause, but a big thank you to Sian for her talk, but especially to Rob for giving up his time. Thank you to everybody, all of you who came and made the webinar well worthwhile and asking questions and engaging. We have a whole program of events planned. We're, as well as some more webinars, we're going to start running some more interactive events. So if you want to actually talk to other people on a Zoom call, we'll be running some workshops. The first of those is the 9th of June, and we're going to try and crowdsource the greatest data strategy in the world. So, so please do come along to that. Libby is going to, or has dropped the links to all these things into the chat. Please join our mailing list. Please come and talk to us on Slack. Dwayne, who's here, he's joined Slack and he's very happy with it, I'm sure. And do get in touch if you want to discuss anything about what you've heard here. The video will go up hopefully tomorrow. So thank you very much. I think that's it. Goodbye.